Yes, and Seek and Destroy. This is Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard. I am your host of Discussions of Truth, Ian Hamilton Chartier. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Podcast, Spotify, iPhones. Drop me a line. Let me know what your. I've gotten some recent feedback. Tell me what your podcast of preference is, just out of curiosity, how you are re-listening to me. If you do listen live, either on Winwood Run 1 or stopmassmedia.com. Again, iantrottier.com has all of my previous guests. This is the 4th year doing the program, and Freedom Reserved, No More Lies comes out. Trying Day Publishing, April 2020. You can pre-order it now on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. You can order it in the UK. In Canada, it's available via Chapters. It's available in Denmark and in the US, Australia. Those are all the locations that I know it's currently available. About 350 pages. Again, you can pre-order right now. Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. And go to stopmassmedia.com or actually, you know what? Even Discussions of Truth. There's a number of websites where the show does stream, and discussoftruth.com is where you can find for purchase a link to the book, a description of the book, the show, and a little bit about me. Okay, so getting into next week. Last week, if you did not catch the program, we had an incredible guest. Again, this program has been very fortunate, and it has received some outstanding guests in its tenure, and continues to receive incredible people, highly credentialed folks. Progressive national and internationally syndicated talk show host Tom Hartman rejoined the program to talk about the war on voting. Talkers Magazine named him America's most important progressive host, and has named his show one of the top 10 talk radio shows in the country every year for over a decade. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and currently he's working on a 10-book series called The Hidden History. And it was his 3rd installment, The War on Voting. His initial was Guns, and the 2nd installment was Supreme Court. The 4th installment, he's going to go into how monopolies have basically destroyed the middle class. And you may not resonate with that. You may think, well, monopolies, well, the last antitrust lawsuit, there was one brought up against, was it Facebook? But really, Americans typically identify monopolies as being something of yesteryear, yesterdecade, yestercentury in the Rockefellers. As you dig deep and you look into the structure economically, this is not a U.S.-run global economy. This is an international economy, and it's not run by the U.S. Okay, you can argue that, and I accept your argument, because the invention of the light bulb, the invention of the television, some of these old patents that kind of sparked the industry in the early years and led, well, in part, leading to Ford's factory line and assembly line and whatnot, putting America on the international stage, economically by far. But that all changed, I believe, completely changed in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. And one has to remember, the United States did not fund itself against the British. The United States was funded. So who were those people funding the war, the American Revolution? All right. And something that is surprised me recently, and I hope it does surprise you, is that George Washington held shares in the Bank of England during the American Revolution. So one might say, okay, wait a second, this is odd because wasn't he an enemy of the British? So why was he holding shares in the Bank of England? Why were those not sold when he went to war? Okay, and then from the British standpoint, one would think, okay, why would the Bank of England permit the enemy to hold shares in their bank? Okay, so then you must dig into the Bank of England. And the City of London is not the overall City of London that you refer to. The City of London is a small square, or I don't know if it's square or not, but it's a very small neighborhood in London that dates back to the Roman Empire. This predates William the Conqueror, and it hasn't changed. It's always been, in a sense, its own sovereign district, the City of London, in so much that the Queen or any royalty that's possessed or occupied royal status, I suppose, over England and its holdings, must ask permission to enter the City of London. Yes, the Queen of England must formally, in a sense, knock on the door to enter the City of London. So what's inside the City of London? That's basically the banking system that runs the UK, the Bank of England. And it's not run by the British royal family. I'm not saying the British royal family is not wealthy. I would project that they're probably much wealthier than any of the wealthiest Americans. Yes, my suggestion is that, yes, perhaps even wealthier than what we think of being the world's wealthiest man. What is it now? Jeff Bezos or Carlos Slim, Bill Gates. One of those three typically occupies that top slot. My argument is that there are far wealthier families that occupy power, that feed in and make up this international banking system that the United States feeds into. And really the only thing, in my opinion, that keeps that American empire, if you will, afloat is its military. Okay, that's really the only thing, because I had a $26 trillion national debt. Who is that debt being paid to? Okay, ever since I've been alive, and that's a few decades, this country has had a national debt. And it just continues to sink further and further and further and further into debt. So, at one point in time, the United States, the glorious American empire, must pay the piper. So who is that? So then you're getting into what is the deep state. Welcome to Discuss Your Truth. I am your host, Ian Hamilton Trottier. I've been doing this program now, it's going on 4 years. I've been in talks about a possible television show in New York. Been in talks about being syndicated by a station in Arizona, another syndication elsewhere, book being released in April. When it comes down to it, it's any human being's right, I believe, to investigate and seek out truth. Okay, it's your right to know. All right, no human being on this planet, where there's 7 billion of us, no one of us has created this system. Okay, we all feed from it. We all breathe its air. We all drink of its water. Yes, our 9-to-5s. Yes, we are cogs to our individual governments. But if you're an American, you are the government. Okay, the government doesn't control you. You control the government. So, speaking of Thom Hartmann, as we go back, in my guess is he'll be rejoining the program. That middle class that represents the government is shrinking. which means the government is getting and becoming more powerful over the people. You gradually slide into what is a dictatorship. Now, I don't have degrees in economics. I don't have degrees in politics. Okay, and I don't have degrees, plural. But what I do have is an opinion. And from everything that I've read, and there have been well-educated guests who join this program, everything I speak of is accurate, and to a degree. And certainly there are corners that are rounded, and then there are corners that are sharp. But it's up to each and every one of us to seek that out, if that makes sense. Nothing against Donald Trump. But are there far more qualified people, diplomatic, balanced in their thinking, to be occupying the Oval Office in the United States? I would think that there are. And again, nothing against Donald Trump. But is he simply a reflection of the corruption that we've allowed this government to become? He's a symptom. Okay? He's a symptom. So moving into next week. Next week will be a very interesting discussion. Behold a pale farce, cyber war, threat infiltration, malware, industrial complex. Professor Bill Blunden will be joining the program. And today, we have yet another very special guest holding by to join us. And sorry, I'm just grabbing a bit of information so we can bring him on. But today, we will be hosting Kevin Shipp, who is a former, oh, there we go, sorry about that, who is a former CIA agent, okay, high-ranking CIA agent, and just bear with me as I, sorry, sometimes I don't get an opportunity to, which I should, to do some of the prep beforehand. I do report daily to a 9 to 5. Okay, so I'll be bringing him on in a moment. The slate for the program is great. So Bill Blunden occupies next week's slot. We're also going to have a doubleheader next week with JP Lindstroth. And last time JP was on the program, I had some technical difficulties. His voice didn't come through. But we went into some pretty good, he's a historian, Oxford PhD, former Fulbright scholar to Brazil. He went into some detail about FDR. So we'll be visiting that again with him today. And it is very possible there will be a doubleheader again today. I have, who I'll keep unidentified at this point, but she has been targeted in a sense. She has information, again, that certain groups are using electronic weapons to target her and harass her. But what happens is that these people cannot defend themselves. Following Bill Blunden, we continue into March with the author of Sabotage, Professor Anastasia Nesvetilova from the London School of Economics. Will be joining the program, and then we'll be ending March with A. Ralph Epperson. If you caught the show, the program, January 2nd, we opened up 2020 with Jordan Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell has 60 years of intense research in this really deep state, this system that really is the reason why I'm speaking English, okay? And it digs deeper through England and that language. It goes much further, okay? And that program is done incredibly well. And I upload all the programs, try to upload all the programs into YouTube, and that one has a great number of hits. He's a very well-educated individual. He's actually 80 now, and he's very kind to join the program. We opened the year up with him. So A. Ralph Epperson is a intellectual researcher, historian in that classification, in my opinion. Okay, and he'll be discussing his book El Nuevo Orden Mundial. Okay, and that's very plain. That's in plain sight. It's on the back of your dollar bill, the New World Order. It's right on the back of your dollar bill. Okay, and again, that's a bill. That's a receipt of credit that you, as an American, pay your taxes and allow this government to run you and rule you. You pay to your debtor. Who's your debtor? On the very surface level, it's your Federal Reserve. All right. So a New World Order. What is that? And it certainly predates the United States, 1776 or 1783 or 89, I think, is when the Constitution was actually initiated officially and put into work. Zachary Voorhees is a Google software engineer, whistleblower, and actually a patent holder. He turned over 950-page cache to the Department of Justice in August of 2019. He will be joining the program to start April. Okay, so please donate at iantrottier.com. You can donate on any of the websites, stopmassmedia.com, discuss your truth. And I urge you to please buy a t-shirt, No More Lies, Stop Mass Media. It's a great shirt, high quality cotton, very comfortable. You'll love wearing it. Support alternative media, because really, this is the last stand. Okay, so let me attempt to bring on Kevin here by means of Skype. So we have not actually connected on Skype previously. So he may not be looking for me on Skype. Oh, there, I see him online right there. Let me try him again. Otherwise, I was going to try him on the phone. All right, here we go.
Hi, Ian.
Kevin, great to connect with you. And welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, I'm having problems with the audio on your end.
Let's see. Can you
may
hear
have
me now?
A bad connection. Let's go out and try to contact me again, would you?
Yes, I will. Okay, and this is concerning because the last time I tried to connect with JP on Skype, I had a problem. Here we go.
Okay, testing 1 2.
Testing 3 4. No.
Yeah, still having some problems. Let me switch to headphones, Ian, just a second, and see if it's our connection here.
All right, sounds good. If you can hear me. If not, Kevin, I will dial your number. But again, hear me. Okay, he's putting his headphones on. Let's see if this works. Can you hear me now?
Okay, testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Testing 3 4. Testing 3 4.
Yeah, I can barely hear you, Ian.
Oh boy!
I don't know what. I just did an interview a little while ago, and it was fine. So,
okay, Kevin, I'm going to call you on your cell. Let's see if that works. Okay, let's call Kevin on his cell. Let's see if that's any better. Okay, it should be dialing here. Let him know. Okay, see if he gets my message that I'm calling his cell. Pardon the technical difficulties. This is a very small production.
Hello, you've reached the cell.
Okay. Let's try it again. Let's try his cell one more time, and we're just have to try let's try the Skype again. I mean, again, I am concerned that the Skype is not working. He cannot hear me. Okay, we're at the 20-minute mark, and the program. And I appreciate your patience. Okay, again, we are attempting to connect with Kevin Shipp. Okay, he's typing again. All right, he's typing again. Let me just let him know that I've tried now to connect with him on the cell. Okay. Okay, let's wait for his confirmation. I've just typed him on Skype. So I have let him know that I'm trying to contact him on Skype. Wait for his reception there. All right, trying Kevin Shipp again. Yeah, typically, I like to have these types of technical issues solved prior so that you don't have to listen to this. But I do appreciate you standing by. Okay, so he may not even be getting my texts. Try calling him again.
Hello, Ian.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm still not getting any audio at all.
No audio. Okay, I'm going to try your cell. If you can faintly hear this, I'm going to try your cell.
Strange.
I'm going to try your cell if you can faintly hear this.
Oh, that's...
Okay. I've had issues with Skype before.
All right, let's see if we have any sound problems.
I'm going to try to cell actually while he's...
No. Okay, audio tech.
Call from +14155776910.
Okay, so he's...
Hello?
Kevin, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I got you on the phone. Did I lose you again?
Okay, so I just hung up the Skype because we were having issues on Skype,
Right.
which might be my end. Last time I had J.P. Lindstroth on, he couldn't hear me either. So we can simply go forward with the cell connection.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, okay, no problem.
So, Kevin, welcome to Discussions of Truth. The technical difficulties, unfortunately, do happen from time to time. I apologize for listeners, but I welcome you to the program. Kevin, I think probably most people that listen to me are familiar with who you are, but if not, would you please give a few moments, a quick synopsis of who you are, why you are a former CIA officer, and what whistle you have blown, if that makes sense.
Yes. Hi, Ian. It's good to talk to you again. Yes, I'm a former CIA officer. I was a protective agent on the detail of CIA Director William Casey. I was in a counter-espionage group. We were searching for moles inside the CIA. And I was in human intelligence operation collection overseas, specifically against terrorism targets. And during one of my investigations, I ran across a possible vulnerability in our embassies where a foreign intelligence agent or worse could hack into the embassy and identify our covert personnel. Submitted those findings to the agency. I was threatened, ordered to drop it. My investigative reports were destroyed. It was removed from the headquarters server. I was called by a high-level official and threatened and told to drop it. And that's kind of where the fun started. I wound up being assigned to a classified base here in the United States. My entire family was poisoned my wife and oldest son almost terminally, and it turns out that there was a pretty bad toxin in or under the house. Anyway, they broke into our house, painted a chemical on the ceiling. I gathered evidence, affidavits from the people on the base aware of the chemicals there, guards that had been ordered to follow our family, documents of the house break-ins, et cetera. And the evidence was so compelling, a federal judge ordered the CIA to mediate a mediated settlement with our family. And then what the CIA did, and this is where I blew the whistle, the CIA invoked what's called the state's secrets privilege, and that's something the NSA and the CIA have used for years to silence any investigations or lawsuits against them in cases like this. So the CIA advised me that if we didn't take a fraction of the settlement in the case, that the CIA would invoke the state secrets privilege, seal all the evidence, and then I would be breaking the law if I discussed the case. So I had my attorney call back and say, not only no, but HE or HE double toothpicks no. You ordered the mediation and you signed the settlement agreement. Well, about a week later, the CIA invoked the state secrets privilege, sealed all my doctor's diagnosis of my family, the environmental tests that I had done, the samples, the evidence of the break-ins, the affidavits from people on the base. The CIA sealed all that and then told me, because of the state secrets privilege, if I talked about that evidence to anyone, I would go to prison. So after a good bit of thought, and I'm a constitutionalist and have been for a long, long time, I decided, no. You don't just do that in a constitutional society. You don't do it to a man's family. So I came out and blew the whistle on the CIA's use of the state secrets privilege. I have published all the documents that they tried to black out and conceal. I put them on fortheloveoffreedom.net on my website. And then I wrote the book From the Company of Shadows. They blacked out the same evidence I'm talking about, and eventually I built a code into that book, ran it through the CIA censors, and they missed it. So today my mission is just to expose what I call the shadow government, and that is the CIA and NSA and the FBI now. Some people are calling it the deep state, and I get into that in some of my speeches in detail, but there is a shadow government that manipulates our elected government behind the scenes, and that means Congress, the presidency, and even the judiciary. So that's what I'm doing now.
So, Kevin, what state were you in when your house and your life and your family, your livelihood was sabotaged? What state was this? Was this Virginia, Maryland?
Well, it was in the United States. I can't say that just because of the risk I take,
okay.
But and some the clearances that I have. But I can tell you, your listeners, you can go out. It was on the front page. Charlie Savage wrote an article on the front page of the New York Times and also the Washington Post. So if you're listeners,
okay.
Google Kevin Shipp CIA New York Times, you'll come up with the story.
And Kevin, do you continue to hold clearances with the organization, or have you completely withdrawn?
No. And what happens when you leave the CIA? I held my clearance for 2 years. When you leave the CIA, you hold your clearance it's automatic for 2 years. And if you're not employed again by the CIA or one of its contractors requiring a clearance, then your clearance automatically dissolves. And when a person leaves the CIA and they resign or move on to another company and no longer need their clearance, then the CIA closes the barn doors and your clearance is stopped. And it's pretty much automatic. For example, James Clapper was still is a senior analyst for CNN. James Clapper had his clearance about a year into his CNN contract, which is kind of a problem. But then after 2 years, that clearance would lapse if he's not using it for intelligence purposes.
Now, we've been fortunate on this program. We've hosted, I know that you are close to John Kiriakou. He's been on the program twice, and we've also had Ray McGovern join the program. How long were you with the CIA, Kevin? And at what point in time in your career did you catch on to some funky business going on in that organization?
Well, I was with the CIA for 17 years and then 4 years with the Department of State anti-terrorism, but 17 years with the CIA. What happens is you join the CIA, as I and many others did and do, wanting to serve your country and do something patriotic, and you get into the agency. You don't really know what's there until you get in. Once you get into operations, specifically on what I call the dark side, when you get into CIA operations, and especially when you get up in rank, you start to see some things you didn't know were there, and the CIA engaging in things that are not only unconstitutional, many times a violation of international law, and sometimes even criminal.
Now that's pretty harsh, and that's pretty heavy for a listener to absorb that, as they really would hope and imagine, and they feel that the CIA is portraying their best interest. But if the CIA then is doing things against the Constitution of the country that represents its citizens, therefore, is it doing business for organizations that stretch outside of the boundaries of the United States? As certainly, if they're doing things that are unconstitutional, it's stretching outside of those that the Constitution represents.
Oh, yeah, yes, Ian, I can tell you the CIA is only out for one party's interests, and that's its own. When the CIA bugs and surveils U.S. citizens, which it has done, and of course we know the NSA has done, that agency is no longer serving Americans or we the people. That organization is protecting or empowering itself, and that's the juggernaut that the CIA has become. Harry Truman, just after about 2 years after he formed the CIA, he regretted it because the power of secrecy that the CIA has, it had gone rogue within 2 years after its creation. And of course, it's gotten far worse in the last almost 60 years. So the CIA will do anything to perpetuate itself. It will do anything to protect itself from scrutiny. It will systematically destroy whistleblowers. And I have a speech out there on how the CIA does it. But the CIA will systematically destroy any whistleblower that tries to expose its activities. And even farther than that, it will go after that person's family.
Kevin, there are a number of things that I want to address with you. Let's start with the simple one. Right now in 2020, there seems to be a international, but certainly in the U.S. since Trump has taken office, an emphasis on fake news, whereas the average citizen, I think, is now questioning the information that they get from mainstream media. Certainly, I would be one of those, and it started in 2016 with the Zika virus scare. Not that I never guessed that the Zika virus itself was harmful, but the controversy surrounding the pesticide that being used, and I stretched various lines into the Rockefeller Foundation and companies that they owned and whatnot. But now, again, I brought up Ray McGovern's name, and Ray McGovern said, Ian, basically what's happening now with these small independent voices is that it gives a platform for those to know what is really happening in this country. It gives them a platform to talk. And of course, you would agree with that, I'd imagine. But really, what is that? How does that fold into the narrative of the internet versus conventional television? Is there a fold? And what I'll add on to that, Kevin, is I think you do understand a little bit of the CIA involvement in Silicon Valley. Is there a tie with In-Q-Tel?
Oh, absolutely. In-Q-Tel is the technical arm of the CIA, and In-Q-Tel, as a matter of fact, In-Q-Tel and its precursor were involved in the creation of the algorithms for Google itself, Sergey Brin, and it was CIA assistance and grant money and seed money that was foundational in the beginning of Google, although Google will not admit that. It is a fact, and the documents are out there. So, and in terms of the mainstream media, we no longer have a true freedom of the press. And I give a lot of talks on mainstream media propaganda, but they're putting out, the mainstream outlets are putting out information that is omitting important things that change the story, adding things in that are not in the actual story, and outright news fabrication sometimes. So if a person doesn't critically watch the mainstream media and examine it for facts, they're being fed the oldest trick in the book, and that's procedural propaganda, which was started by Edward Bernays under Woodrow Wilson. And the mainstream media is following an exact playbook of creating impressions, thoughts, and even affecting the polls by intentionally putting this information out to the American people. And what you said is so true. The new freedom of the press are outlets, alt news outlets, shows like yours and others that are out there and on YouTube that are putting forth the facts and the information, good, credible, vetted ones, are the new freedom of the press, in my opinion, and that's all we have right now, because the mainstream media is no longer presenting the factual, unbiased news.
Now, in regards to media over the past decades, the ownership of the main outlets has become smaller and smaller. So, therefore, that symbolizes a really a sort of monopoly, but a total distortion of the way that messages get sent out to Americans. Why is it then, Kevin, that these divides are happening? Is it intentional, or are these main media outlets, CNN, ABC, MSNBC, whatnot, they seem to be biased in their political affiliation? It's like Fox News is all one side, MSNBC is another side, CNN seems to be tainted. Is that being done deliberately to divide viewers?
Well, you can go back to the old line, follow the money, Jerry. A lot of these, a big driver of all these news outlets, from CNN to Fox, are the advertisers that will or will not support their programming. But even over and above that, these major news networks, especially the mainstream media news networks, are no longer owned by journalist organizations. These are owned by major corporations like Disney and others, and those corporations reflect their board of directors and the worldview of their CEOs, which is forced down through the board of directors to the editors, down to the reporters and the news anchors. So there are controllers that control the media, and I give a detailed presentation on media propaganda. There are the elite controllers that manipulate the message on programs, news programs like CNN, and their worldview go down through the editors and into the actual journalists themselves. It is an intentional bias that is put in several of these news organizations, to the point where facts are twisted and information is left out or added in there. And the control comes from the top. It comes from the wealthy elites. It comes from corporations, and not from journalist organizations. So it's no longer journalism.
So let's get into that briefly. I've spoken in the past a short while about, we had a guest on the program, Servando Gonzalez, who's actually a Cuban-born historian now living in the U.S., but he says what happened under the Fidel Castro regime in Cuba was basically just a testing ground to set the stage with what is an intention by various powers to implement in the United States. And he draw an example of political correctness and how the suppression of speech starts simply like that. Right. With that said, Kevin, what created what? Did the CFR create the CIA, or did the CIA create the CFR?
Well, the Council on Foreign Relations was instrumental in the creation of the CIA. The CIA sprang out of the Council on Foreign Relations, and many of the original leaders in the CIA were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And let me add also, too, that Philip and Catherine Graham, the original owners of the Washington Post, were members of the CFR at the time, and they were connected to the CIA at the time, which is ironic because, in my view, I call the Washington Post the Mockingbird paper because it still has connections to the CIA today, and the CIA affects its reporting. So the CFR came first, and we know that that's a globalist organization, and it was instrumental in the formation of the CIA. This all, in terms of the effect this all has on the news media, this is all coming from, heading towards, and manipulated by globalism and globalists. And we all know the effect that George Soros has on the American news media through grants, foundational supports, and his own organization, Media Matters. George Soros is manipulating the U.S. news media, and from a globalist perspective. He's a globalist, and of course he's come out publicly and said that one of his goals is the elimination of U.S. sovereignty and getting into the new international global order. So these are globalists that are affecting the heads and tops of these corporations, or the actual owners themselves, that have a globalist view, and that view is being pushed down really all the way down to the thought police and what people say about their gender names, personal pronouns, and all that other things. That's all coming down from the top, and it's being fed to the American people by these elites who are controlling these multi-billion-dollar organizations.
Right. So let's get into a topic that most people kind of question and doubt, which would be, and I just want to get your opinion on this, which would be the JFK assassination. Of course, there are still thousands of files that have not been divulged and open to the American public. The Warren Commission was led by Allen Dulles, and Kennedy had fired Dulles before he was shot. Mark Shaw's been a guest on this program. He's a former defense attorney in California, and he's got a lot of momentum behind his series of books regarding Dorothy Kilgallen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her or not. What's My Line host, and she was an investigative reporter, very close to JFK, and she was she passed away in her Manhattan apartment from barbiturates. But what Mark presents is a case that she was murdered. Was George Bush, by 17 years in the CIA, you knowing that organization pretty well, was George Bush at all tied to and behind, in your opinion, behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
Well, I can tell you this. I think it's the documents are there. It's pretty clear, despite his denials, that George H.W. Bush was a CIA operative going back well before the Kennedy assassination. Even involved in some front oil organizations related to Cuba. And there is no question in my mind, if you look at the evidence and everything that was happening during the time when the Bay of Pigs investigation failed and they tried to blame that on JFK, Allen Dulles was already transferring former Nazi scientists into the U.S. and falsifying their paperwork to President Truman. So Dulles was engaged in some pretty dark and illegal activity and crossed Kennedy. So Kennedy fired Allen Dulles from his coveted position as director of the CIA. That made Allen Dulles JFK's public enemy number one, his nemesis. And I understand that Dulles began meeting with former senior CIA officials in meetings to discuss how they were going to remove JFK from office, and Dulles never recovered from that. Well, then, of course, JFK is assassinated. There's a lot of indication, I think pretty clearly, that the mafia was involved. In my opinion, the evidence shows that the CIA was also involved. But one of the most telling things is the fact that when they had the kind of mock Warren Commission hearings, of all people to put in charge of the Warren Commission, they put in charge, guess who? Allen Dulles. That's like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. It was a massive cover-up. Allen Dulles coordinated which CIA officers would testify, which wouldn't, and he advised what the CIA officers would say during their testimony. He controlled the entire Warren Commission hearings when they related to the CIA.
Yeah. So, in regards to livelihood in the U.S., we know that we lost a great president, and from my point, it seemed like I wasn't alive at the time, but it seemed like JFK was kind of a bipartisan president, regardless of political party. I think he was accepted widely by most Americans. It doesn't seem that we've had a president like that since JFK, and so that kind of gets me thinking about how just is the voting system in the United States. And of course, that kind of lays back into the Constitution that represents the people. And you've alluded to that Constitution dying. Paul Craig Roberts has been on the program before. He's a former senior economist under the Reagan administration. And he said on this program, he says, Ian, Americans simply are completely brainwashed. He didn't say that, but he essentially said that. He says they do not have any more constitutional rights. It's a mask. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that there are constitutional rights? Can they be saved, or is that simply a cover-up? That Americans simply don't have constitutional rights, and that voting is somewhat or mostly manipulated?
Well, I would agree with that. We are under, in my opinion, a post-constitutional government. We are no longer under a constitutional government. Of course, economically, that ended in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal and has no reserves and is manned by foreign banks. But if you look at the voting process, Americans think, we have a say in the vote. Look at the dynasties that have run this country that have gotten elected. There was the Clinton dynasty, then there was the Bush dynasty. and the same abuse of secrecy, the same domination of power, the same abuses by the Department of Justice happened under all those administrations, whether they were Republican or Democrat. And that's because this is all the deep state. Money and power get elected. Money and power re-elect its own connections in families or political circles. So that is what is running this country. And then connected to that, you have what they're calling now the deep state, the shadow government deep state, which was this massive $1 trillion corrupt system that runs Washington and ensures who's going to be elected president of the United States. No, we are not, in my opinion, any longer living under a constitutional government. We're now living under kind of a modern form of tyranny.
Right. And so who is behind this? Is it safe to say, Kevin, that Federal Reserve is that concrete barrier, or rather that moat that surrounds that castle that prohibits Americans from entering and draining, if you will, to use Trump's words, draining that swamp? Would it be that Federal Reserve in your mind, Kevin? Or if not, what else would it be that might be that major obstacle for Americans to regain that country they felt that they once had?
Well, I think Federal Reserve is number one, because that would get Americans economic freedom, constitutional freedom back right there, and that's connected to everything. But secondly, we now have these monolithic organizations that are running our country. Essentially, the NSA, which we know was spying on millions of Americans, the CIA, another juggernaut that has secret budgets to the tune of billions of our tax dollars spent on operations and coups in other countries that we know nothing about. So you've got that shadow part of government that is operating things and will many times dictate who is president and who is not, and get us into wars based on the decisions of people that are unelected and largely unknown by the American people. So we're no longer under a constitutional government. It's got these juggernaut intelligence services, and then the entire economy is manipulated by an organization that meets in secret. Its budget is secret, and the member banks, our foreign central banks, are also secret.
Kevin, so getting beyond that, and let's say that the real deep state, as you've alluded to, is a conglomeration of these international banking systems. Therefore, it's almost like the Bitcoin movement, where there are no physical boundaries. What's the next step for the human species in that regard, if that makes sense to you?
Well, where we're heading right now, Ian, is we're heading for international economic globalism. And that's where the majority of the nations in the world are going. That's where largely the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, they're all pushing the United States into that. You can call it what you want. I think Susan Rice, Obama's National Security Advisor, called it the new international order. Others call it the new international economic order. It's the new world order. It's the new global order that they're pushing towards, and that's the danger. That's where we're heading right now, is towards that global economic order. And we're starting to see they're proposing, the Federal Reserve is proposing FedCoin, which is a federal digital Bitcoin, and the IMF has been proposing digital global currency for some time. The chilling part is that is where we're heading. It has been held back, I think, in my view, by the current administration, which is not perfect, but for now. But it's heading in that direction, and Americans need to understand that's where it's heading. And critically think about candidates on both sides, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, because globalism is starting to, bit by bit, eliminate U.S. sovereignty.
And I think that's beautifully said, Kevin. Again, folks, this is coming from a 17-year veteran, high-ranking, decorated CIA officer. Again, 17 years in that organization, and they're putting it right there out. This the world government is heading towards what is called, in a sense, a new world order. You see it right on the back of the Federal Reserve banknote, the dollar bill, as it's referred to. And you've said it very beautifully, Kevin, in that regardless of Democrat, regardless of Republican, that political chaotic dog chase is really going nowhere, and it's In my opinion, Kevin, it's simply meant to be kind of reality TV. It's meant to distract Americans and dumb them down and get them thinking about nonsense. Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, it certainly is, and you can see that. And if you look at the kind of machine that was started under Woodrow Wilson and his senior operations information officer Edward Bernays, and the propaganda system that the government developed, a specific procedural propaganda system for getting messages out to the American people, used then, and it's being used by our government now. But the goal and the stated mission of Bernays' system, which the government is using today, and some of the mainstream media, is that, and they actually believe this, the minority elites have got to think for the average masses, in this case in America, because the elites are intellectually superior, they're financially superior, so it's the elite's job to manipulate and control the thinking of the masses, and that is exactly what we're seeing right out in front of our face now in our country on behalf of the United States government and on behalf of the mainstream media. They're literally trying to tell Americans what to think and how to think.
Now, it was my opinion in 2016 that the Zika virus, and all my research that I've done, I'd reached out to medical background at New England Journal of Medicine. I'd reached out to folks at Lancet in the UK. Nothing definitive was sent to me that Zika was directly causing microcephaly in these developing children in Brazil, and thus this was kind of the scare in the mosquitoes that were transmitted in Florida at the time. What I found in Dibrom or Naillet, interchangeable, is that the Rockefellers were really behind that, and Chevron Chemical Corporation. This is a engineered mosquito repellent from the 1950s. Very controversial at the time because it was banned in Europe, Kevin, yet it was sprayed in Miami-Dade. Rico Rosselló in Puerto Rico rejected the shipment at that time by the World Health Organization. So what I found, Kevin, was that there was a large question of how seriously dangerous is this Zika virus, and is it simply being covered up by the spraying of this pesticide? So then here we are 4 years later, and now we've got this other global, which is becoming a pandemic here, it seems like, in this coronavirus. And what caught my eye, Kevin, was that Zero Hedge, a financial publication blog, was banned by Twitter for suggesting an alternative view regarding the coronavirus. They got completely banned. What is your view on the coronavirus? I'm not saying it's not dangerous, but what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, Ian, I think, and you made a great point, and I hope your listeners remember that Twitter banned Zero Hedge's objective reporting from a scientist regarding the structure of the coronavirus itself. Banned that from the public arena. And there's no question in my mind that the coronavirus is being used, as the government does, as governments do, as a system of control, both of affecting the stock market as well as controlling the American people. Even in New York, they're starting to take draconian procedures to control the virus. They're taking away freedoms of New Yorkers, and we're starting to see the government take away freedom through this thing. I'm not downplaying coronavirus, but it's interesting. They're talking about the 2.3% people that die from it, which is terrible and needs to be reported. But it's interesting how they're spinning that, because they're not talking about the 98% of people that survive the virus, and many with minimal effects. So that shows you, and we're all after facts and after truth. So if you're going to report the truth, report the number of people that are dying and report the number of people that are not. 98% of the people that get coronavirus are not dying. So the point is that the virus itself, as serious as we must take it, is being used, here we go again, as a mechanism of control by governments and the media to control the behavior, in this case, of the American people, and even globally.
What's the next step for the cell phone? Is that simply going to be conduced more into a chip where human beings globally are implemented with chips? Do you see something like that happening, Kevin?
Well, another thing, yeah, I want your listeners to remember that the globalists, including in this country, they're pushing what's called transhumanism. Transhumanism is the merging of human biology and psychology with artificial intelligence to become kind of one sentient being. In other words, computer chipped humans, which is a kind of a very minimal way of putting it, but that's where we're heading towards global transhumanism and the merging of humans with artificial intelligence and eventually digital economic currency. And real quickly, one of the most horrific parts of the Epstein case, despite the fact that he was clearly murdered, was Epstein was involved in a huge blackmail espionage ring, but all of his money, the millions that he was contributing to MIT and to Harvard, were all for research on transhumanism, the merging of humans and artificial intelligence. So that shows you where we're heading. That shows you where the governments are heading. And I think that's where people need to be alerted and keep an eye on this because it's shocking. It's mind-boggling, but that's what's happening.
I think the average listener wants to retain their freedoms and their liberties that are experienced by the creation of that U.S. Constitution. The struggle seems to be doing that, especially if there's a global lockdown on a scare of a virus and people will get quarantined and sent into camps, and what tomorrow brings we don't know, but certainly cities are being quarantined globally. $26 trillion in debt, the United States. Who does this country pay the piper to? Who's behind this deeper international banking conglomeration? Can you identify a nuclei in that regard, Kevin?
Well, I think I can. And this $22 trillion debt that the United States has now got itself into is going to result eventually in an economic crisis. Mathematically, that has to happen. That will happen. The only question is when. Some people say 2 years, some people say 5. It's very difficult to predict, but that economic crisis is coming. And what a lot of people don't know, some of your listeners you may know, that there is $21 trillion missing from the U.S. Department of Defense budget, and also connected into HUD. There's $21 trillion. They can't say where it came from, and they can't say where it went. So as soon as people started getting on that, Catherine Austin Fitz talks about it in great detail. Greg Hunter on USA Watchdog talks about it in great detail with the actual documents. That $21 trillion people are demanding. That would put us in a national debt of more like $40 trillion instead of just 22 if you had that 21 trillion. So what had just happened? What did James Clapper do as the director of national intelligence 2 years ago? He moved that secret missing $21 trillion over to, guess where? Secret classified government accounting systems. So it's now under what I call the shadow government. It's classified and no one will ever know what they used that $21 trillion for. So there's an example there.
And what is this? Is this put in offshore accounts? Where is this money going?
That's the bizarre part. It came through the books. The 21 trillion clearly came through the books. They tried to reverse engineer and trace back where it came from. The records were blocked. Then they tried to trace where the money went. Those records were blocked. And when they started getting too close, the government moved it, as I mentioned, under a classified program. So there are people still digging, still screaming to get those records and find out what in the world our government did with $21 trillion that it's not telling anybody about it. Of course, that's our tax dollars. But just as maybe more importantly, is they're doing it in secret. They've used this money in secret for programs that are secret, and they're not telling you and I exactly what they did.
Now, various research that I've done, Kevin, is that, for instance, the Federal Reserve, of course, is not audited. It's you can't penetrate it. I don't know how much you need to have in order to buy shares of it. It's kind of this hidden banking system that governs the United States. That's compared from research that I've done to, let's say, the Vatican, which is its own sovereign nation and the banking system that runs that. And then also, Kevin, the Bank of England, where the monarchy doesn't control it. It's run by international financiers. Is there a link behind the Bank of England, or excuse me, the City of London, which I've explained to listeners is separate from the City of London that is visited for tourism? There's a small neighborhood in that city that it's its own financial district, and it dates back to the Roman Empire. The William the Conqueror signed an agreement giving it its own freedom and liberties, and it's been around for over 1,000 years, and the British have always been subjugated to it. What else is interesting, Kevin, is that the last time I had a regular guest on the program, J.P. Lindstruth, who's actually an Oxford PhD, and he's a former Fulbright scholar to Brazil, I had said, hey, J.P., he's an American historian. I says, J.P., George Washington owned stocks in the Bank of England during the American Revolution. So looking at both sides, why would he be owning stocks in an enemy's bank, and why would the enemy permit that? Is there something behind? And yes, it might be difficult for listeners to really kind of think that, hey, has there been a stranglehold on the Constitution and on those liberties going back to the original founding? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Do you think, in your opinion and research and knowledge, Kevin, that the Bank of England may be a major player over suffocating that oxygen that the Americans breathe from?
Oh, the Bank of England is certainly exerting a control over that, and these global banks largely are tied together and interlap. And,
right.
And as I mentioned earlier, we lost. Speaking specifically of America, we lost our constitutional freedom in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created from foreign banks. Our economy is being run by global foreign banks, and we can just leave that statement right there for people to remember that our economy is being run by global foreign banks in the form of the Federal Reserve. So we are no longer under a constitutional form of government, and we no longer make the choices and decisions for the economy of our own country.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Shipp, 17 years with the CIA. Kevin, some last parting words for listeners. Why is it that you do what you do to stand up for Americans, to get them thinking about fighting for alternative news and really the underlayer of the last hope, I would say, for any type of liberty or justice for all? Why do you do what you do, and what do you recommend, Kevin, for listeners to do? How do you recommend they act?
Well, Ian, every great movement in history has started with a grassroots movement of people that finally were fed up, had enough. Typically, usually educated people who love their country, started a grassroots movement that eventually, in several cases, overturned some of the most powerful governments in the world. And that's what we have going on right now. I know you hear this and all the shows I'm on and people I talk to and people that communicate with me. We are experiencing a very quiet revolution, especially in the United States. And even I hear from other countries, a very quiet revolution where people are fed up with being controlled in the areas you and I just talked about. So there's a revolution underway without question. And there's a grassroots movement for freedom in the United States that's underway without question. So I want people, your listeners, to have hope that there is a huge movement of millions of us out there that understand this is going on, and we're all starting to work to expose it and work against it. The best thing people can do is what you and I are doing right now, is speak out, write, educate people, talk to people about this, get the facts, get the information, and share it with every single person, whether they want to hear it or not. Gracefully share it with every person that you can, network, and use what we talked about earlier, and that's the new freedom of the press. That's all of us in these grassroots news organizations, and as I mentioned earlier, grassroots movements are powerful, and we've seen them overturn entire governments.
From the Company of Shadows is his book. Kevin Shipp is his name. Kevin, thanks for joining Discussion to Truth. We look forward to bringing you back on the program in the future. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks, Ian. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Shipp. Technical difficulties there on Skype, which is a little concerning for me because 2 weeks ago we had to resort to phone call with JP, but hey, it is what it is. It's technology. There are glitches from time to time. We have been remotely out of studio for a number of months now, and so that also contributes to I'm not saying it is the case this time to some of the technical difficulties. Do contribute and donate to the program. And like Kevin said, start your own. Talk, spread this message, share it with a friend, share it with family. Do your own broadcast, podcast, whatever you want to do. Next week, William Alva Blunden joins the program. He'll be discussing Behold a Pale Farce. We're going to be getting into InQtel a little bit more. Cyber war, threat inflation, and the malware industrial complex. Folks, Kevin Shipp spent 17 years with the CIA. He's a guy that knows a thing or two about how this government is run. You heard him right there say, no Democrat, no Republican. They're both chasing their tails. They're a distraction from what's really going on. And what's really going on are these international banking organizations. He agreed. The Bank of England is a large player. I didn't ask him about the Vatican, but it seemed like it resonated with him. The Federal Reserve. How much does the Federal Reserve really represent you? When you pay $1 in the store, right? You buy a Coke with $1, how much does that dollar represent you? It doesn't. It doesn't represent you. It represents elites, wealthy elites that are feeding into a larger banking conglomeration that is controlling the actions of you and me and the United States and has completely corrupted this political system, absolutely, completely, and totally. And if you don't stand up right now, you're gonna lose that if we haven't already. Okay, we may have already lost any hope of regaining and retaining any type of these liberties and justice that we've inherited by these forefathers that set us up. I've got some great friends in Canada. Paul Hellyer joined the program. A very high-ranking former deputy, basically, Prime Minister of Canada. Very much on board with what is happening with these smaller programs. Like Kevin has talked about, like Ray McGovern has talked about. These are high-ranking political members of government that runs day-to-day operations. They know what they're talking about. Okay? I haven't held those positions. It just so happens, folks, that I began questioning the Zika versus pesticide spray in 2016, and from there, this is all unfolded. Okay, and let me mention, in regards to technical difficulty, Bandy Lee, Dr. Bandy Lee, author of The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, who said on this program here that the current commander-in-chief is mentally incapable of continuing being in charge of what he's in charge of, and that is the country that you are a part of if you're listening in the U.S. She'll be rejoining the program April 8th, and that is due to a glitch. We're going to have her reappear. She's agreed to come on. So that'll be followed by Zach Voorhees, who will open up the program on April 1st. And again, he's a former Google engineer, an employee. Let me just squeeze in this quote here before I reach out to our next guest for the doubleheader. Voorhees claims, the reason why I collected these documents, now it's a 950-page cache that he released from that he had from Google to the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. The reason why I collected these documents was because I saw something dark and nefarious going on with the company Google. I felt that our entire election system was going to be compromised forever by this company that told the American public that it was not going to do any evil. They were intending to sculpt the information landscape so that they could create their own version of what was objectively true. He continues to claim his former company created algorithms to hide its political bias within artificial intelligence platforms. Kevin Shipp just addressed that. In effect, targeting particular words, phrases, and context to promote, alter, reference, or manipulate perceptions of internet content. The issue is that free market has been distorted, and what's happening, he says, is that and this is a quote, distortion is so grotesque and the engineering is so repulsive, all we need to do is just expose what's going on. People can hear that it is bad, but that can be biased. But when they see that Google has actually written with the documents, this will actually be taught in universities of what totalitarian states can do with this type of capability. The world that Google is building is not a place I or you or our children want to live in. That's Zach Voorhees, and it is a quote by the website that Kevin and I just talked about that was banned by Twitter, Zero Hedge. By the way, he worked on Google Earth, which is completely fed by the CIA, 2008 and 2013. And I'm going to close this program by a little tit for tat. I don't think I've shared it yet, but I'm going to throw it out there because I feel it relevant. It just, nothing is coincidence, folks. In my opinion, nothing's coincidence. How can you prove that nothing is coincidence? How can you prove anything is coincidence? In my opinion, therefore, nothing is coincidence, okay? It's you're unable to prove it otherwise. With that said, I just so happened to be in Palo Alto in the year 2000. I was eating at a Greek restaurant. I think it was called Evia. I'd been at the Greek restaurant, and out walks a businessman dressed in suits. What I overheard in that discussion, this is year 2000, whatever, I don't remember the month. What I overheard in that discussion, and somebody had mentioned to me, hey, she says, hey, that's Charles Schwab. So Charles Schwab standing there, and I overheard Charles Schwab talking about a new search engine. At that point, we'd had Ask Jeeves, Netscape, Yahoo, right? We had some various search engines that were doing incredibly well. All right, I never thought any of them could be overtaken. In fact, Yahoo at that time was probably one of the main kings of Silicon Valley. Okay, this is Palo Alto, year 2000. And I've never shared this information on the program before. And I hear Charles Schwab talk about a search engine by the name of Google. I left the country for a couple years. I came back, and that small little company that had an office on University Avenue in Palo Alto had grown into a mini empire. Today, 2020, it essentially, in many ways, monopolizes commerce on the internet. Again, these are my opinions, but yes, that's fact in Palo Alto 2000. Coincidence or not, don't know it. If you're listening to this program, I thank you. Share with a friend, share with a family member, donate, buy a t-shirt, stopmassmedia.com. No more lies. I think they're $20-$30. I'm not sure what they are. Right there at discussiontruth.com or stopmassmedia.com or Ian Trottier. That's INTROTTIR.com. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and again, both handles INTROTTIER.com. Thanks for joining the program, and thanks for listening, rather. Until next week, that's Wednesday, always Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard. Folks, be awesome.